I believe, or someone at Ayala who set up the meeting has to record or give me permission, but right now I cannot record. Oh, well, thank you very much. Recording has started. Thank you, Hyounhee. You will tidy it up afterwards, I hope.
Your wishes are command. How's that for an impressive performance?
I am so impressed. And I'm having my coffee as well. So you guys go get your coffee so you're ready to go.
Thank you. See you later. I've had lunch for the next year. I asked my colleagues what's happening in English. I can't remember. Se on kiva, jos se perustuu. Siinä käyttää. Se on tyhjellä. Tyhjellä.
Hello, Kaisu. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. How are you?
I'm very good. It's good to see you. Looks like a very wintry morning out there in Paris.
Yeah, it's been quite cold, but I guess usually this time of year it is cold.
Yes,
We come
I
later.
remember.
Yes.
Yes, normally we're not at the meetings until March, and by then it's starting to warm up a bit.
And it's a bit dark also.
I remember those. Well, it would be dark at your place as well right now, isn't it? Still in the morning?
Yeah, even more. But I kind of remember that in March it is more light also in Paris.
Paris in the springtime. They've written songs about that.
Yeah, there must be.
Thank you very much for agreeing to do the presentation tomorrow for us on the RPNT group. It sounds very interesting, the work that they're doing.
Yeah, okay. Yes, I can kind of inform what's going on. Basically, it's just drafting a guideline.
Well, that's very true, but it's good to know what's happening. And the work that, we did with Aurelia and their GNSS, the blockers, trying to support the issue with nefarious or otherwise spoofing or jamming. So
Yeah.
good. Okay, well, we'll get started in just a few minutes. I think people are going to start wandering back in. And just to let you know, we are being recorded right now, but I have asked Hyounhee to take this first part off, and he'll, as he always does, Ayala will split it up and the presentations will be posted independently. I've just heard from Hyounhee. She will be joining us shortly. She's just sent me a copy of her presentation as well, which is great. I have it ready to go. Here we go. And I just got an email from somebody else too. Oh, just to remind everybody of the presentation session. Very good. People are logging in. Did anybody got caught by the train strike today, or is everybody okay? Ernie said the buses were fine. Yep. Oh, here comes Derek too. Hello, Derek.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
We hear you fine.
Okay, good.
Excellent. We've got some people from Paris meeting as well logging in, which is great. Ross is logged in. I guess Ross is not in the room. Is that right, Ernie? He's logging in. Yeah. Hi, Ross. How are you? I just had an email from Hyounhee. She's joining very shortly. I think Sanna will probably join a little bit later. Sanna and Tero will join in a little bit later because they're not on to the last session. Everyone's so busy. I'm very, very grateful that people are taking time out of their day as well to give us these presentations. Thank you, everybody, for your work last night or yesterday afternoon, early this morning for me. I got a copy of that, and I will be posting it up on the file share probably during break time today. And just to remind everybody, after break today, we will be doing the work on the review of the DPMR, so another guideline 1153 work. I'm hoping that some of David's presentation will help inform us on that, make it more generally the concept of digital voice over VHF. Welcome back, David.
Thank you. I hope everyone can hear me okay.
We can.
I must say the weather out there doesn't look as good as it is out here.
We will get started very shortly. Ernie, do you know of any others who are going to come in physically in the room? I mean, we've got some people online. I am waiting for Hyounhee, but she will be here shortly. She's already just sent her presentation as well.
But we got 1 minute to go, so.
We got 1 minute to go. Yes, okay. That's the joy of being online, isn't it?
And Hideki hasn't rung the bell yet, so.
Oh, okay. Where is the bell?
Yeah.
The bell's in the other room.
It is, yeah, that's the problem. No bells.
Yeah.
Julian, I think what we've got is what it is. So
Okay,
as you wish to start, please continue.
Well, we have we only have an hour and a half, and we have 3 excellent presentations that we're going to get started on today. And so David, just to let you know, you've just taken your camera offline.
I am just doing the sharing
just doing the
thing.
share screen. Excellent, thank you.
Let me know.
So I'll
Does
just
that come up?
introduce. It did. It came up perfectly fine. It seems to be working really well. I'm just going to introduce David Rowe very briefly. I'll let you introduce yourself a little bit more.
Sure.
David has very graciously agreed to do this presentation. David's located in Adelaide in South Australia, and he has developed a royalty-free codec for use with voice. And this is one of the areas that we have been discussing for some time now within the IALA framework. And I'm looking forward very much to your presentation, David. I will be keeping track of time because we do have 3 presentations, and I do want to make sure we have time for questions. What I would say is if you do have questions and you are online, please pop them into the chat box. And even if we don't get to them during the session, I'll be able to forward them on to David outside of this session. If you are physically in the room and not joined online, please just write them down and I'll get them from Ernie later in case we don't have time. But I will now just pass over to David.
How long
David,
would you like me to take, Gillian?
well, you have 30 minutes total. So if you could take,
Okay.
say, 20 minutes and we have questions, or we can do questions during the session. It's really up to you, but I will let you know at minute 25 that you have 5 minutes left.
Okay, yeah, I think I can manage that. There's just 13 slides, so we should have plenty of time for questions and discussion.
Excellent. Okay, over to you, David.
Great, thank you very much. Yeah, my name is David Rowe. I'm one of the primary authors of Codec 2. There's actually a team of us, which I'll discuss a little bit later. So in this presentation, I'll start with an introduction to Codec 2. I'd like to talk a little bit about patents, codecs and digital radio, some information about the project leadership and organisation of Codec 2, which has just taken a bit of a new direction, and a roadmap where we're heading with the project, and then a little bit of the opportunities that an open source codec might represent your group. Okay, so Codec 2 is an open source speech codec. It's patent free, license free. It operates on low bit rates, or at low bit rates, from 3200 bits per second down to 700 bits per second. It's in fairly common use by the amateur radio community for digital voice on HF and VHF. It's been in use for around 10 years, and we've gradually been developing both the codec and the protocols that run the codec over the last 10 years to work on those channels. So it's real world, it's in use today on radio channels not unlike yours. I guess the niche it fills is open source speech codec, but beneath 5,000 bits per second. Above that rate, there are some other codecs such as Opus, etc., that do a really good job, but there isn't much in the open source space beneath 5,000 bits per second. And that addresses a very big problem that many people, such as yours, have encountered with closed source speech codecs in that space. It comes as a C code library. You can download it from GitHub if you like. And you can compile it on any Linux machine or any other PC and start playing with it. It also compiles for really anything that'll run C. We run it on PCs, desktops, or we run it on $1 microcontrollers in small embedded platforms. So it's already running in real small and large platforms. It consumes on your CPU about a few tens of MIPS and a few tens of kilobytes of RAM. And it's in use every day on both HF radio using something that we call FreeDV. That's a digital voice protocol especially designed for HF radio. HF channel is very difficult to get data through, or digital voice, because of the severe multipath problem that it has. But nevertheless, people use FreeDV, which runs the Codec 2 protocol, runs the Codec 2 codec to communicate over national and international HF channels every day. And it's also running on VHF radio using another ham radio protocol called M17. That's roughly comparable to P25, those sort of protocols, DMR, in terms of its capability and its modulation scheme. Okay, so where does the codec fit into a digital voice radio system? On the top left, we have your microphone signal that gets sampled by an analog to digital converter. That gives you quite a high bitrate sequence of samples. The job of the codec then is to compress that down to a very low bitrate, typically a few thousand bits per second for your sort of application. We then use forward error correction, FEC. That applies redundant information to the codec bitstream in order to protect it in its journey across the radio channel. It then runs through a modulator of some sort, which gives you an analog waveform that can run over a HF, VHF radio channel. On the receive side, we have a demodulator, which converts the analog waveform back to a series of bits, running at a few thousand bits per second. There's then a forward error correction decoder, that will use some of that redundant information to correct any bit errors and send them to the Codec 2 decoder, which converts that bit stream back up to a fairly higher bit rate speech samples, which are sent to your digital analog converter and out of the speaker on your handset. So that kind of shows the context of where the codec's used. And I'll talk about how having an open source codec can sort of make you treat the system a little less like a black box and more like a complete system to get some big system advantages. I'll discuss that a little later on. So first of all, what is speech coding or speech compression? Typically, we take speech samples from something like an A to D converter running at 8 kilohertz, which gives you a bandwidth, an audio bandwidth of 4 kilohertz. We then compress them down to some very low bit rate. It's the art of what can we throw away? What's the redundancy we can remove from that signal? But we wish to retain intelligible speech, which means you can understand what is being said by the other speaker. And we wish to retain natural speech. We'd like to be able to understand the speaker. We don't want them to sound too much like a robot most of the time. So as well as intelligible, we'd like it to be natural. And sometimes we have to trade those two off, in particular as the bitrate drops and as the errors creep into the bit stream. At these low bit rates, we tend to use techniques called model-based speech coding, where we extract parameters that model the speech for a short time period, such as 20 milliseconds, and we send those model parameters over the channel. At higher bit rates, we tend to use something called waveform coding, where we look at the speech waveform and we send some sort of compressed version of that waveform over the channel. Unfortunately, that doesn't get you to the very low bit rates. So an example of a model parameter would be the pitch. As I'm talking, the pitch of my voice is varying, and these sorts of codecs estimate what the pitch is and then send it over the channel as a binary number, perhaps once every 20 milliseconds. When you're designing a radio system or a protocol with digital voice, you need to be careful to treat it, to understand that voice is not like data. As an example, if you are sending data over a radio channel, typically when you get a single bit error in a data packet, then the entire packet is discarded. You'll get a CRC error and throw it away, or over the internet, you'll ask for it to be retransmitted. But with voice, a few errors is usually okay. We can cope with bit error rates of a few percent generally, which is a very high bit error rate when it comes to normal digital data. And we can even cope with entire packets of voice being removed. When we develop our protocols, we test them at a 10% packet error rate. So 1 in 1/10 of our speech is being thrown away, and yet we can still retain intelligible speech over the channel. Another interesting feature of speech is that the packets of vocoder or compressed voice information, some of the bits are more important than others. So some of them will have a greater impact if there's an error, and some others you won't be able to hear the impact at all. So that can lead you to do things like design unequal forward error protection schemes and other ways that make more efficient use of the overall resources of the channel to improve the speech service. And we can build better voice systems by taking these things into account. For example, we can send voice with less power or make it go further with the same power, use less spectrum, or make it more robust to channel errors. Okay, so let's talk about proprietary codecs. They tend to come in hardware, like a little chip or a code processor, or some sort of licensed software form. They can be difficult to distribute if you're being forced to integrate a third-party chip onto your board. Physical hardware needs to move around the planet to build your radio. They can be difficult to integrate if you're soldering another chip on the board. There's all sorts of hardware interfaces. It takes up a room on your printed circuit board. You really have no choice in that. They cannot be modified. If there's something wrong with it, if you don't like even something nothing to do with the speech codec, just an interfacing issue, something that would make your handset less expensive or easier to assemble, too bad. They can't be modified. Understanding how they work is discouraged, and modification is usually actually illegal under the license condition. And then there's also a bill of materials cost and a recurring expenditure when using proprietary codecs. That can typically add up to quite a large proportion of even low-cost handsets. And then there's the issue of codec royalties. I guess the position I've arrived at, and several others that I've worked with, is they're essentially useless tax on business and communication. They don't benefit anyone except the people you're forced to spend the royalties to. They make basically a closed source codec makes a small number of people very rich, but it does tend to stifle innovation and education. You've got this little black box in an otherwise open protocol like, say, P25, and that's it. You're stuck. You can't change it. And this has really locked in a lot of the development of digital radio for about the last quarter of a century, which is kind of sad and unfortunate, given so many other parts of the radio system are based on public domain knowledge and freely shared. In contrast, an open source codec helps a large number of people, and it promotes innovation and education. So we can see codec patents as something, as a toll booth, and I'll sort of show you why that metaphor makes sense. The secret behind these codecs is the authors of these proprietary and patented codecs. They basically have borrowed very heavily from the public domain. Perhaps 5% of the algorithms they use are original, that they developed and patented. And 95% of the algorithms in those codecs, if you look at all the maths and things involved, are algorithms that have been in the public domain for some time. So basically, they've taken 95% of what belongs to all of us, and they've installed some toll booths and charged them for us. But the good news is, to build an equivalent codec, we just need alternatives to the 5% that is patented. And there's quite a body of knowledge and skills out there that make that possible. Okay, a little bit about the Codec 2 organisation. As I said, this started about 10 years ago. I was encouraged to work on it by people who were feeling a similar frustration to you might be at the moment around the use of closed source codecs. We've demonstrated that Codec 2 is a viable alternative to closed source codecs on HF and VHF applications. There does seem to be a significant user demand pending, perhaps due to that sort of quarter century issue that I mentioned before. I've had contact from organisations including military defence organisations, your own sector, several organisations there, satellite communications who run voice systems, and also there seems to be an interest in safety systems that operate sort of last-ditch communications for safety situations. They all require or would like to have an open source low bitrate speech codec. So what we've decided to do is we've formed a project leadership team. There's about 5 of us involved in running the project, and we've also become a non-profit organisation. And what we're doing is applying for grants and seeking funding to push this technology forward. The typical development model we've got is we want to put a few years of intense effort into it to get it up to a higher quality standard, which I'll talk a bit about in the next slide. And then we anticipate some sort of maintenance tail just to keep things moving along after that. But we're looking to put a burst of development effort in the next few years. Some of that's around the codec, some of it's also around some of the open source protocols that we mentioned before. And the basic mission here is to get quality open source speech codecs available for everyone to use. So in our roadmap, we're addressing both technical and organisational challenges. So there's some technical things we want to work on, like making a better speech codec, make it use less CPU or less memory, make it sound a little better, make it more robust to bit errors. There's also organisational challenges. How do we make this something that's really easy for professionals to use to build their products, move it out of that sort of hobbyist ham radio environment into something that's usable by everyone. And we need to grow beyond the core developers. It's myself and a few others, and we need to get beyond where it's any few individuals that are responsible for the project to give it a long-term view. As I mentioned, improve speech quality at those sorts of target bit rates. Maintenance, that's pretty boring, but you need to make sure the code keeps compiling, make sure it can run on different platforms. So we do quite a lot of sophisticated automated testing of our software. There's over 150 automated tests in the software that we run every day. We make a modification on it. So boring but necessary maintenance, things like a professional level documentation of the algorithm, how to use it, things like that, and description of how it works so others can build on it. And we'd also like to integrate it into some products used by commercial companies. So the opportunities that represents, at the end of the day, we'll have a software library that you could run in a part of your radio, for example, on the baseband processor CPU. that will just use a few tens of MIPS. It might just happen to run on the CPU you're already planning in radios. In that case, it'll cost you nothing. Or if you have to add another microcontroller, it might be one of these low-cost STM32, that sort of thing, with a very low BOM bill of materials. There'll be an open, documented bit stream, so everyone will know how it works and how to talk to it. This will encourage competition. Other people can build different implementations. You don't have to use our reference one. Other people can decide to code it up and do tweaks and innovate, make it better, come up with ways to make it cheaper. It's also, we're looking at having a bit stream that's future-proof. There's quite a lot of research going on in speech coding using neural networks and machine learning. And there's been some demonstrations of them taking the bit stream of low bit rate codecs, like Codec 2, and decoding very high quality speech from it with no change to the bit stream, but they've suddenly made them sound fantastic, like better quality than we're using at the moment. Or like FM stereo type quality radio. So that's what's coming. These neural decoders are not mature today, but that's the future. They also consume a lot of power and CPU. But we want to make our codec future-proof so that when that becomes everyday, the neural decoders, they can simply drop into the system in 10 years' time and suddenly everyone is enjoying better speech quality based on the decisions we make now. The other opportunity you have with an open source codec is to tightly integrate it with the rest of the radio system. So if your channel, the maritime channel, has special demands, like I think I've heard mentioned that the multipath is indeed an issue, we can try to design the best radio system, including optimizing the codec to work over that channel. For example, the multipath channel might have certain error patterns that suit a certain frame length or interleaver length on the forward error correction. So it can be designed to accommodate that and work better. In contrast, the closed source codec will be a black box. They won't even tell you sometimes what sort of forward error correction or other things are going on inside it. And you have no real choice and you can't integrate it very well with the rest of the radio system. One example of customization for your group would be some sort of fallback low bitrate safety mode. So it's possible to break the bit stream into sort of high quality bits and low quality bits. And if you send the low quality bits, say with a little more power, you can find that they'll still work at a longer range than say the entire bit stream. So what you'll get there is a gradual degradation in speech quality. It'll sound better when you're close, and as you get further away, the quality will drop, but there'll be some sort of safety mode that might perhaps double the range compared to current FM radios. So that'll sound bad, but it'll be better than no voice at all in an emergency situation. And you trade off the speech quality by making it go twice as far. It also has the advantages you're not sending as many bits. So another thing it could do is extend your battery life, which might be important in an emergency situation on a handset in a safety situation. So that concludes the talk. Open for questions. I'll see if I can get out of presentation mode.
Thank you so much, and you've done really well on time. So we do have our 10 minutes for questions. So any questions for David? I'll be very surprised if there aren't any. It might take a few seconds for them to come forward, though. Yes, Ernie.
David, thank you very much for the presentation. You mentioned a bit rate for the codec. Are we to assume that bit rate is inclusive or exclusive of forward error correction?
Exclusive. However, the core codec does handle a few percent bit error rate by itself without FEC.
So if it is exclusive, do you have a gut feel as to how much percentage of the fundamental bit rate would need to be allocated to the forward error correction? I understand that it's got to do with how robust the forward error correction is, but in your experience thus far, how much of the percentage of the channel is used for the codec, and how much percentage of the channel is used for FEC?
On our HF modes, we use about the same bit rate for the channel as the codec, so it's called a rate 1/2 code, and that gets a significant performance advantages. So that's a typical use case. We use about the same bit rate for the forward error correction as the vocoder bits.
Thank you.
Okay, so just to confirm, that's basically 50-50. So the same amount for the.
Yeah, so if the codec's running at
FEC.
700 bits per second, we'd have 1400 bits per second over the channel.
Okay.
Mm.
Thank you for that.
That's one of those system level questions, though that would vary depending on your channel.
Very good. Thank you for that. Derek, over to you.
Yeah, hello, David. Nice to actually see you. Well, we've heard about you for a long time, so it's nice to actually see your face for a change.
Hello.
A question is, we compiled Codec 2 a few years ago and ran it on a PC to have a good listen to it. We ran it at 2400 bits per second because that's our target bit rate. And to partially answer Ernie's question earlier is for DPMR, we run at 2400 bits per second for the codec, and we add 1200 bits per second for the FEC. So it's a 1/3 rate for VHF in DPMR. We weren't overly impressed with the quality of the speech at 2400 when we compared it with, well, the standard reference is AMBI+2, sadly. I wonder if you've made any improvements to the quality in the past few years that we could have a look forward to.
The 2400 rate hasn't been touched in quite some time. That's one of the things we'd like to address in our next round of development. We do have some people running the 3200, which is pretty similar, and many of them prefer that to the AMBI at that rate.
Yeah, 3200, I can believe that because that's significantly faster. The AMBI's running at 2450. So, you know, we've at Etsy, we've developed a version of DPMR targeted at maritime usage, but it still uses the same codec socket, i.e. 3600 total, because obviously in DPMR, AMBI+2 got chosen, sadly, for commercial reasons more than anything else. So I think what we're looking at is basically a 2400-ish style bit rate for the codec plus 1200-ish for the FEC. And we need to have something that is as close as possible in quality to the AMBI+2. So are you planning any future work in that direction?
Yes, we are. That's part of the work we're planning to do. And we're looking for funding to support that work. We believe it's possible.
Okay, that would be good. Do you actually do any PESC scoring on it all on your codec so we can compare it in terms of numbers against AMBI+2 and others?
I haven't done any myself. It has been used in several academic work where they've compared it to codecs such as MELP, the US military standard, which also runs at 2400. So there's some papers available that have some third-party comparisons.
Yeah, but does it actually have the PESC scoring on it?
It has MNR, MOS or MNRU's scorings.
Okay, so you haven't run the ITU test phrases through it?
These are ITU standard tests, I believe, or MUSHRA tests they're called, sorry. Yeah, so there's standardized procedures for testing codecs that have been used in some academic papers.
Comparing with MELP doesn't really help us, to be honest. Okay, well, thanks for that. Well, I look forward to seeing what you come up with next.
Thank you.
And Derek, just to take that a bit further, actually, because I know that David did mention he's looking for grants and funding to bring this forward. Is there something specific that you could draft that says this is what we need that could help tailor the work that David's doing so that would be more useful? I'm not sure, David, if that would be useful for you as well, but I'm just sort of hearing you saying that you're using test standards that are, you know, fairly standardized and within the ITU area, but Derek saying that actually they want other ones. So is there something that we could work between us as you're doing this development, David, to ensure that the open source codec is going to meet the maritime need?
What we probably would be looking for was some sort of support for our work rather than setting standards for work that others do.
But I mean, if it means that we're going to need to see the comparison. So Derek, what was that comparison that you wanted again?
PESQ, P-E-S-Q.
P-E-S-Q?
Yeah.
And you're doing MNR, I think you said, David?
I'm sorry, I forget the exact acronym. We're not doing any. Third-party people have done the tests.
Okay, and so they do that based on your work, and then a third party comes in. So, I mean, I don't know, Derek, could we take it and go through that PESC file?
Yeah, you certainly could. Yes, it's a standardized system. You stick a WAV file in the front end, and WAV file the other. It's all done by machine. It's not perfect, but at least it is a standard.
Do you have the capability to do that within your company?
Yes, it's not difficult.
Okay. So David, you're saying, I got David and Derek here. So David, you're saying that a third party does the testing. Derek, you're saying that you could do the testing. So I think actually we're seeing some option here for some further support, and then the feedback from that could go back to David then to help with the development.
Yeah, we can certainly look at that.
Okay, I'm just going to make a note of that.
I think I mean, we got very enthusiastic about Codec 2. Sorry, Codec 3 is jumping ahead a bit. A few years ago, which is why we took the time out to actually go and download the code and actually compile it to run on our kit and actually try it. And I have to say, we had 3 vocoders running in parallel just to evaluate the quality. We had Codec 2, Ambi+2, and our own Ralqui. And just on a listening test, it was clear that Codec 2 was miles behind. So I think there's some way to go yet.
Okay, thank you very much for that. David, do you have any other comments on that before I see if there's any final questions? No. Okay. Any other questions? I have one that I've been saving for the end, but I do want to let it open to the floor. Any other questions from the floor? Okay, well, I have a question for you, and one of them is to do with some conversations that we've had, and I think Jeffrey, I'm not sure if Jeffrey's online or not. We did a test. Hi, Jeffrey, there you are. We did a test, and one of the things that we've been talking about within IALA and also with the Dean of the Worldwide Academy is that the voice quality and the concept of degradation of voice. So I think, Jeffrey, one of the comments that was in one of your presentations is that the voice was there or else it wasn't. And in VHF radio right now, in a normal analog environment from a VTS performance point of view, as a VTS operator, we can sort of hear it start to degrade as you get to the edge. Now, David, I know that we talked about this in the preparation for this, and what's some of your comments with regards to that sort of almost like a graceful degradation, which is operationally the way it is that we deal with it now, as we're looking at people trying to use this system going forward?
It's a system level question. That's a decision they made in the design of the system, and when they muted it. And there's ways to make it gracefully decode if you wish to, from a system level design point of view.
So from an operational point of view, the VTS operator would probably see no difference at all when it's digital to where it's analog, just depending on how it's set up. Is that correct?
It depends how you design the protocol. It'll degrade in different ways, but it's possible to retain intelligibility rather than having a hard limit.
Okay, good. Oh, so Jeffrey's saying, he's correcting me there. He thought the voice would stop at once, but it started with a more computerized voice, and I think that's what you're talking about, that you lose that natural sound, and then it died. And I see that Derek has a comment to bring out too. Derek.
Yeah, sorry, yeah. Yeah, the two things. Yes, Jeffrey was quite right. That what happens in the Rotterdam trial is we started losing voice packets, and so you basically got a higher packet error rate, but the human ear is quite good at actually reinserting what it's missing. So you get this computerized, roboticized style speech for a while, and then it drops off completely. One thing about the possibility of using a reduced rate codec in low noise or high noise conditions or for long range is I'm not sure that's going to be a great deal of use to us in terms of VHF, as most of our systems are line of sight range limited rather than power or noise limited. The other issue is, of course, that the voice coder is only part of the system. You have to work on where the protocol falls over as well. Clearly, if the voice keeps going after the protocol falls over, then that's not much good to you really, because your protocol's gone, so you haven't got a signal anyway. So the two are related. So if you want a lower bit rate, high reliability voice system, you also have to have a high reliability protocol to go with it, which currently we've got a very good one, but it's fixed. So we'd have to think about that very carefully.
Thank you very much, Derek. And I would like to thank you very much, David, for this. I've got a couple of points that I think we will be discussing, because we will be going into this in more detail after the morning coffee break in Paris. And we'll be looking at our guideline 1153 that we started reviewing previously. Thank you, David, very much for that, for your presentation. And I'd like to make sure that everyone in the room also thanks David. So I'm going to clap him.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, David. That brings me to the second presentation of the day, and this is from Ms. Hyounhee Koo on developments in 3GPP. So we heard briefly from Ms. Koo yesterday, and I'm looking forward to getting a little bit more of an update. As we all know as well, the 3G has pretty much been discontinued everywhere, and we are now looking to the future of what's happening in 3GPP. So over to you, Hyounhee. Did you want me to share the screen, or are you happy to share your screen?
Can you
There's my
see
answer.
my? Yeah.
We see you
okay?
fine. It's perfect, fine. Thank you.
Okay.
Over to you.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, Jim, for having an opportunity of the presentation at ENAV Working Group 2. But it's okay to turn off the camera to keep the good voice quality during my presentation.
I think that's perfectly fine. I've turned off my camera as well.
So I would like to briefly present IMT technology-based market evolution. It's the outlines of my presentation today. This time, you might feel much more comfortable about my presentation compared to what I presented so far in previous ENAV meetings, because this time I introduced the market snapshot, 5G standardization trend, and standardization activity for the next generation mobile communication systems. First part is the market snapshot of IMT system. Generally, there are relations between the standard development and the market lifetime of a 3GPP standard-based product. Standard development are carried out, and in 1.5 years or 2 years, commercial deployment is launched on market. Recently, second generation networks started to shut down from the year 2015. And third generation networks also started to shut down from the year 2020. 3GPP also started to reduce the standardization activities for 2G and 3G by establishing a RAN Working Group 6 in August 2016 to deal with the second generation and third generation enhancement instead of GRAN meetings in charge of the second generation standardization. And 3GPP announced no activities for second generation and third generation enhancement anymore in July 2020 by formally closing RAN Working Group 6. How about the LTE and 5G? I think they might be different from second generation and third generation. And I hope my presentation today can give you about why LTE and 5G are different from previous generations. This This slide shows one of the market snapshots about mobile subscriptions. In the year 2022, about 75% of mobile subscriptions are based on LTE and 5G. In the year 2028, it is expected that more than 90% of mobile subscriptions are based on LTE and 5G. The increase rate of 5G subscription on the left, on the right figure shows more rapid increase than LTE subscription since the first deployment on market. Market snapshots of this slide shows the mobile subscription by region and technology. In 2028, interestingly, the market share of third generation is expected to be less than that of second generation. The market share of 5G is expected to be rapidly increased in Northeast Asia, North America, and Western Europe. However, it is important to remember that 5G includes the enhancement of LTE technologies, and a mobile user with 5G mobile subscriptions can access LTE mobile networks. The map on the left shows the operator investment in 5G in the world, and 5G devices are not only phone type, but also other types to be launched on market. PP completed the first technical specification to support the satellite access in Release 17, whose standardization was completed in March 2022. As I said in the first slide, there are 1.5 years or 2 years gap between the standardization development and the commercial deployment on market. At CES 2023 in January 2023, Qualcomm announced Snapdragon satellite enabling the mobile phone to provide satellite-based two-way capable messaging services, and it is planned to launch smartphones with emergency messaging on Snapdragon satellite in the second half of 2023 this year. In addition, MediaTek also announced that they powered a smartphone with a 5G NTN connection in a lab environment in August 2022. 3GPP continued to develop further enhancement of supporting satellite access over 5G and beyond the systems, and more diverse types of devices are expected to coming soon to us. So now I will provide the 5G standardization trend. This time, I intend to describe kind of vertical trend rather than technical perspective. 3GPP members are getting to be increased since 5G standardization started. Compared to the year 2015, the year 2022 have almost twice members. It does not mean that the number of organizations from ICT industries is increased, because the organizations from ICT industries are almost the same between the year 2015 and the year 2022. Such increase is from the 3GPP participation of organizations from other industries. Many industries come to 3GPP to enable their business to be digitally transformed over 5G systems. Particular industries intend to transit their wireless communication tools from proprietary solutions to 3GPP standard-based solutions. As generation evolves, the complexity and acquirability of wireless communication tools are getting to be increased. In terms of the backward compatibilities, there is a difference between 5G and other generations. The 3GPP generally support the backward compatibility for previous generation technologies. For example, third generation system, UMTS, supported the backward compatibility to second generation system. LTE support the backward compatibilities to the second and third generation systems. However, 3GPP made a decision and 5G provides the backward compatibility to LTE system only. The economy of scales of 3GPP standard-based solutions is one of the biggest benefits that other industries expect to have when they implement their digital transformation over 5G systems. 5G standards were developed to support a requirement from diverse vertical industries, and it's very important to make an effort of a cross-industry service harmonization to enable the economy of scale of 3GPP standards-based product or market to be enlarged while preventing the fragmentation. Now I will briefly introduce 5G beyond standardization activities. ITR recommendations are published from IMT 2000 called as the third generation system on market. In case of IMT 2000, there were several radio interface technologies developed by a few global standard bodies, including 3GPP. From IMT Advanced, radio interface technologies developed by 3GPP were dominantly used on market. In case of IMT 2020, called as 5G, there are 4 radio interface technology introduced in ITR recommendation M.2150, but 5 technologies developed by 3GPP is the representative radio interface technologies of IMT 2020, which is widely commercialized on market. From now on, I would like to explain the difference between 5G and other generations. In case of IMT 2000, called as 3G, and IMT Advanced, called as 4G LTE, the peak data rate and mobility, 2 key performance indicators are defined for the characterization of IMT systems. On the other hand, IMT 2020, called as 5G, defined 3 service usages, which is enhanced mobile broadband, massive machine type communication, and ultra reliable and low latency communications to characterize the IMT 2020 systems. In addition, other KPIs as well as the peak data rate and the mobility were also defined. In other words, the paradigm shift of IMT systems was made compared to previous generations. ITR started standardization activities for IMT toward 2030 and beyond, so the official name calling IMT toward 2030 and beyond is not yet defined. Once ITR completed to define the vision of IMT toward 2030 and beyond, which is this time. 3GPP start to develop the standard for IMT toward 2030 and beyond, to be submitted for technology proposals in ITOR WP5B from the year 2027. And 3GPP continue to develop standard for enhanced IMT toward 2030 and beyond. I hope that today's presentation helps you to understand IMT technology-based market evolution. Thank you for joining my presentation.
Thank you very much. That's wonderful presentation. Very, very interesting. I've made a few notes. I will open the floor for questions now. Yes, Ernie.
Hyounhee, thank you very much. The question that we're hearing about is, how does 5G and 5G satellites come together? Because obviously satellite communications is really interesting for the maritime environment. Do you have any information?
How can I say? As I said, the support of satellite access in 3GPP system from the standard perspective was completed 2022 at this point. And then that in order to have a commercial device, at least we need 1.5 or 2 years as a minimum. And then as I showed that Qualcomm also started to provide their solution, and then MediaTek also showed the demonstration. So I assume that how could I say, more enhanced device will come according to the more enhanced standardizations are completed in 3GPP. Because 3GPP, how could I say, there are some different characteristics between a legacy type of 3GPP radio access technology and satellite access technologies. So in case of 5G, we developed the specification to kind of adopt satellite access over legacy 5G radio access technology. It means that 3GPP need to work more to provide more optimized specification to support the satellite access as well as a legacy type of radio access technology. And then such efforts are still ongoing in 3GPP because there are many ongoing studies and work items in list 18 and list 19. And then in case of 6G, which is not yet official name, we expect more optimized approach will be come out to deal with both legacy type of terrestrial net radio access technology and satellite access technology. So how could I say? So as time is moving, and then I expect a more enhanced device supporting satellite access with more rich services will come out in the market.
So just before I go to Minsu, I just want to make sure I've got that clear. So the presentation, so these non-terrestrial networks, so the NTN, 5G NTN, which I believe that's the satellite component. There are some initial tools out there. You mentioned about Snapdragon and one of the other ones that have gone and they've done testing and trials. I think that's on there. Yes, coming soon. And so you were saying that it's about 1.5 to 2 years between the standardization and the actual delivery. And since that standard was created and completed in early 2022, that we could be seeing as happening at the end of 2023. Is that right?
Yeah. So this, as you see that here, Qualcomm also plan to provide such a device in the second half of this year. So it's kind of common to have 1.5 or 2 years as a minimum to prepare for the commercial product once the standardization is completed. But as I said, this 17 version is just provide how could it not basic, but as I said, the adaptation of satellite access into the 5G system. So that's why there are more work to be done to support more rich services in order to make such a product commercialized on the market. And then such a work now still ongoing. But most of people in ICT industries assume that more optimized solution will come out in next generation. So as you see, that so far only messaging services are expected to come out soon. But when 3GPP provide the mobile service from second generation, voice call and messaging was the first services. So I assume that such a enhancement in terms of service aspect will be applied for the satellite access. So the first step is providing messaging services, and then we will work on more to support diverse services seamlessly between a legacy type of a terrestrial network and the satellite access network. So to support the seamless connection between two different radio access, the more work needs to be done from the diverse perspective. So that's why it just so we could say that the door is open now, and then there are more work we need to do, and then but it will not take much longer. So I think within 5 years we could see the more enhanced services available between legacy terrestrial networks and then satellite access network seamlessly.
Okay, thank you so much. And so that's much clearer. I appreciate that. I'm going to go to Minsu next.
Well, thank you. Thank you for a very nice presentation. I have two questions. Actually, the first one is a following up on the satellite component. So yeah, I heard that there is more work to be done at this moment. But what about the market response? Is it really maybe it will be a little bit early to say early stage. But what about the market response? What people how does people like? I mean, this satellite component of 5G. And second question is the sidelink technology. As long as I know, it works like AI. So can you elaborate a little bit on the sidelink technologies?
Okay. Regarding the first question, the market response, yeah, it's a very initial stage because the available services is mainly the emergency messaging. But I found out that there's some news from US because such a device is already available in the iPhone 14, right? Yeah. So I think my interpretation on the market response on such a device is quite potentially positive because it could make people's feel kind of relief wherever they are go. So, but if more rich services could be available by using such a device, it might be good to create something new businesses. So we expect the more positive response on the market if more functions or more services are provided. And then the 3GPP now is working on that. And then the organization from satellite industries also make an effort in 3GPP and in 6G research area as well. And then second, sorry. And then second was the side link. Yeah, 3GPP continue to work to develop the enhanced technology to support the side link. Initially, public safety domain requested to requested the 3GPP to develop such a technology, but the bottleneck was the size of market public safety have. But since bigger industry joined to 3GPP, we focus on more effort on the development of a side link. And then now from release 17, 3GPP started to, how could I say, extend the scope of the side link for other cases as well as particular and bigger industries. So, but how could I say? But in my opinion, it's very important to make a voice of what maritime domain need to using such a direct communication side link. So that's why I continue to make the voice during the 3GPP meeting for the maritime requirement. And then actually we did in the last year during release 18 essay workshop. And then this year there will be release 19 essay workshop to discuss the candidate of release 19 technologies. And then at that time, I think it will be good to provide similar voice for maritime requirement, including side link this year. And then I will contact the ILA secretary on that later.
Thank you. I just made a little note to say how to get that voice heard. We are almost out of time, but I would like to leave one last question to Jeffrey. So Jeffrey, your question, please. You're the last one.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the presentations and the questions before, because I think I'm going to extend the question of Binsu, because I was very interested in the site. The other in other communication systems there are. So I had two questions. One is the vessel to car, was vehicle to vehicle. How that will work? Can it work without outside of the network, of 5G network, with no connection at all? So you can operate in the middle of the ocean or in the North Pole with no satellites. How will that work? That's the question I have. And I looked at the 5G core network, not the new technology radio. And I was wondering, when I see that, and I'm an IT guy, I see a lot of technology that was combined all together. And I was wondering, can that core network also support AI, voice, VHF, VDES in the future? It's all the technology, so you can have the connection across network technology or short technology. So you can use it in the port operations for your VHF radio system there, but also for AES to have one core network that you can use for it. So that were my questions, and I'm wondering what what that will do in the future. Also, I see here multi-hub relays, smart home containers. I think it's kind of sort of mesh networks I'm referring to, the old basic order. So, what are the developments in that one?
Well,
Yeah.
Jeffrey, that's a lot of questions for a very short
Yeah.
time. So we're almost out of time. I'm wondering if maybe, Jeffrey, you could write those questions into the chat box, and maybe we'll ask Hyounhee if she could prepare a bit of a response, because those are we could have a whole session on those questions alone.
Yeah, actually,
Welcome.
those are very good questions, but I need more time to answer. But yeah, I think the Jillian's suggestion is good, and then I will think about how I could provide the feedback, the answer efficiently to help you have a better comprehension, and then I think some answers of your questions might be provided during my presentation in Tokyo workshop. So yeah, and then yeah, but what I could say is that the 3CPP work step by step. So so we develop the technology enhanced way per release. So we need a kind of a gap analysis to identify what is missing for maritime usages. So 3CPP try to develop the harmonized way, but without the voice of the other industries, 3CPP cannot imagine what they need. So that's why I think we need to gap analysis between and then gap analysis for that, and then the cooperation with ILA will help to identify such a gap, and then to deliver such a voice of a maritime requirement to help the 3CPP understand what they need to work more. Yeah, but I will consider more and then try to provide the answer in next opportunity of my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and thank you for the questions, Jeffrey and Hyounhee. I look forward to the presentation in Japan as well. So thank you very much. Are you guys going to clap too? There we go. Excellent. Thank you. I saw that. Well done. And now you can stop sharing, and I will pass the floor over. Thank you very much. And our final presentation of the day is a topic that we've had in this working group before. It came up in our blue sky thinking, this idea about the developments that were going on with remote pilotage. Now, as we know, in Finland, they've been doing a lot of work on remote pilotage. They even amended the Pilotage Act to support this, and they recently held a very successful remote pilotage days. So I'm really pleased to pass the floor now to Sanna, who actually I know for many years from the work on the VTS committee, and it's really lovely to be in contact again, and to Tero. So over to you.
Thank you, and I would say, good morning still from Helsinki. And thank you, Gillian and others, for inviting us. This is really great, as we have until late last year, autumn, we have been more or less working on a national basis. So it was excellent. And based on our previous discussion, one can honestly say that working with this working group and with your knowledge would definitely benefit our way forward. But so we are here together with my colleague Tero Vainio, who is our technology manager, and I'm the operational director responsible for the pilotage in Finland. And since there's not much time, we're going to focus on very high level of what we have been thinking about. Naturally, there's a lot more details and contradictions that we've done. So you feel free to ask afterwards, and you will get the presentation from us. But we'll make sure that there's some time for questions also. It's already 5 past, so I will go forward. First of all, why do we want to talk about remote pilotage development with others, with other stakeholders, pilotage organization, industry, etc., is that there's a lot of talk about, and especially during the last 2 years and the last year, there's been a lot of talk about remote pilotage. But what is it? Based on our discussions with other European and international pilotage organizations, we don't have a common picture about what remote pilotage is, and it's often stated that how could we, because we don't even have a common understanding what pilotage actually is. I often say that I'm not talking about remote pilotage because I believe it would be easy. Quite the opposite. I believe that it's a huge challenge. Many reasons. I could list a long list of issues that will be struggling, and one of is the cultural things. Technology might be the easiest one, as changing the present cultures and ways of working and thinking outside the box will definitely be really hard for the ancient pilotage operations. The aim of the remote pilotage is of course the same. We aim on doing just as safely the operations as we do now, but we're going to do it differently. And we want to highlight that we need to come out when we're digitalizing pilotage. We have to be even safer, but we need to think other new ways of doing the traditional thing with the same focus on it. So one thing is also that we're not only talking about remote pilotage, we're talking about development of pilotage where the use of technology and new use of common communications vocabulary, using of shared situational awareness, etc., will already benefit the traditional pilotage and will maybe get new levels of service to pilotage, which nowadays there is only PECs and pilots and nothing in between. We want to highlight that we are part of the international 1C autonomous maritime ecosystem, have been not from the starting point of the ecosystem, but for years already. And this is because we believe that pilotage is part of this ecosystem that is ensuring the whole navigation on the fairways, of course, on the open seas, but in particular, from our point of view, as the last mile service provider on pilotage. As Gillian already mentioned, we got a new Pilotage Act already in 1st of February 2019, which enables us to do remote pilotage. What was significant about the law was not that we are going to do remote pilotage in next year or even earlier, was that we have a framework of how to apply for the permit. So it states, for of course, what in general that we have in here in this slide, but also the fact that the permit that we will need to apply from the authorities will have loads of things, including the assessment of risk, including all the responsibility, including the methods, the technology, and the operational models. So the concept of operations has to be really precisely defined when we go forward. But yes, so we have the legal framework also. We put a lot of effort on the risk assessment methodology, so making sure that when we go further with the studies, we will have a risk assessment, a formal safety assessment complying system. Of course, we are utilizing more state-of-the-art like stamp analysis to do the actual risk assessment. But our way of thinking is that we have now, with Aalto University, we have developed this framework with our pilots. So our pilots were one of the most significant information source to this risk analysis framework that we've already done. Of course, it can be fully utilized only when the remote pilot is defined. Maybe a small thing that I always like to highlight is the fact that on the traditional pilot operation, this is from ABB and it focuses on general on the navigation, not only remote pilot. It's the idea of a human looking at all the various instruments that the navigator has on the bridge and making the judgment the analysis, the assessment with his or her own brain and having to dig in more and more information. Of course, many of the manufacturers already do fusion and judgment in their own systems, but it's far from what it could be. So on the right side, you see the approach where we think that we will actually gather a lot of data from different sources. We will do fusion and conditioning and judgment and provide this already fine-tuned information for the pilot, who can then verify whether the information is good enough or how it implements. At the same time, the binoculars there show that the pilot will be doing the judgment and seeing the values and the information still him or herself. One of the things we did already almost 2 years ago is that we involved our own pilots heavily on this work. So we selected, there was almost 10% of our company's pilots applied to be the remote pilot. We chose 3, and they are from different pilotage areas, and they are the ones participating all the research and studies with us in doing the development. So they're actually working, their main job is to work as pilots on pilot stations, but they are always along with us when we do research in our projects. Then a little bit of storytelling. So this is in particular a situation where I meant saying that I'm going to tell a story, an overall situation awareness, and then loads of things have been discussed and thought about beneath this surface story, but that we don't have time today. So the first thing to tackle is that we know that globally there is a problem with the master pilot information exchange. Whether we look at the accident statistics or analyses from different countries, we always see that this was not fully done. The master was not aware of the pilot intentions or vice versa. And even last year, new studies were published about this. So we believe that remote pilotage or future pilotage, the traditional way, will need to have a very enhanced information exchange before the ship enters the pilot boarding position. The pilot boarding position is highlighted here in the upper right corner, showing that all of the information exchange and also the tests on the information exchange, the common situation where created ECDIS, PPU, whatever the technical tools will be, the aim is that we will have a common situation awareness between the master on the port side and on the left side and the pilot on the right side picture. And when the vessel enters, we call it the safe tube. You can see it on the upper right corner. So the safe tube is a very important concept for us, sort of highlighting the fact that we want to create to the ship being piloted or remotely piloted a safe tube, a safe information tube that provides all necessary information for the captain to navigate his or her ship on these challenging piloted waterways. Then when we have entered the actual remote pilotage area or the fairway, or traditional pilotage if we are only providing additional information, we want to create to the captain not putting new equipment on board the ship, but with the present equipment already on board, and also maybe adding some information layers or maybe one unit of information, like we use the PPU nowadays, to make sure that the captain and the pilot have all the time identical situation awareness, where we can add information also from the shore side to the captain. The information is of course related to the fairway, to the other traffic, positioning, very accurate positioning and redundancy on all of this is required. It also entails very accurate meteorological information on all malfunctions, etc., etc. And we have been working with the future fairways and defining the elements of the future fairways together with Finnish authorities and other stakeholders. And we believe that the future fairway elements will be providing this, also the future aids to navigation. So these kind of ships need to be connected to this data, and also the ship needs to, not only the remote pilot, but the ship needs to get a lot of information that is not readily available nowadays. It also means that we need to connect to the ship's equipment. So our point of view when we go to the Finnish challenging waters is that the ship will have connections. This is why we have the manufacturers. We will make interfaces on board the ships and collect information from there and send it to the remote pilots. And Tero will later tell a little bit about that, how that was done. We've set some really strict prerequisites for remote pilots in the beginning. So our point of view is that early on when we start remote pilots in the coming years, hopefully before 2030, the level of competence on board the ship needs to be high, and the equipment has to be high standard. And then the captain, we are relying a lot about the competence and equipment on board the ship, and it is easier to get the remote pilots with less technical solutions. But further on in future, we believe that when the technology is in place and we have together internationally developed procedures for this, then the level of technology will rise and maybe the competence of the on board is slightly decreased. This, of course, entails the fact that the remote pilots have to be trained to this new world. The captains receiving the remote pilots have to be trained. The VTSOs have to do. We also have to have a common situation awareness with all the different fairway services, ice breaking, tugs, and in particular with VTS. So this is something that the pilots or the pilotage organizations cannot realize themselves. We have to be doing this in an ecosystem that is on the fairway. But in the beginning, we think that the captain has to be able to do the harbor maneuvers him or herself, but we will assist in many things on information related to position of grains, lines, men, wind conditions, etc., etc. We drew a very high-level picture about how we see the development and why we want to cooperate internationally, both with pilotage organizations, but also with authorities and manufacturers in order to achieve this very challenging task of remote pilotage. So we believe that this has to be done in the ecosystem, and the cybersecurity, of course, is here of utmost importance. It is highlighted on the outer circle of our picture. Then we need to define what is the safety. What is possibly, we will probably have different kind of categories in remote pilotage, from very easy piloted fairways all the way to, for example, coming and saying that in Finnish, very narrow archipelagic fairways with ice conditions, etc. It is going to be really challenging. So we need to define what are the categories and safety levels for different kind of pilotages. We need to identify the technology used. We need to tackle the problems with connectivity. And when we've done that, we go to do the risk assessments. How can we ensure what are the mitigating measures? How we'll make sure that the risk is low? Testing, validation, architecture. We need to have an international architecture for this to understand how it works. And then we can finally go to regulations and standards and processes to ensure that we have the correct competence on board the ship and ashore, and we can ensure the safe and secure remote pilotage. Reality check. You're going to get this, so I'm not going to say more than what we've been doing the last years is this slide was done to make sure, in fact, the decision makers understand that we are only starting this process, and we've identified what needs to be done to make this possible. And of course, we've identified the standardization issues, the training issues, etc., etc. But we've also identified that remote pilotage can only be achieved if the captains of the ships will receive a similar service in different places. So this cannot be, like VTS, this cannot be developed just nationally. And pilotage is a nationally regulated thing nowadays. So a new world on pilotage has to start. And then I'm going to give the floor to Tero, more about the technology briefing on how we go forward.
Thank you, Sanna, and good morning from my behalf also. We have been thinking remote pilotage as a cloud service type service, because there is several things why we think like this. For example, we are gathering data from the ship, but also from various different sources. Weather information was mentioned, but also favor information, safety devices, positioning, that kind of things, to get the same situational awareness to remote pilot and ship crew also. As Sanna mentioned, there is still problems with the connectivity from the ship to shore, but also of course to cloud services. Also, when we are thinking about standardization, we will need to standardize various things, for example, user interfaces and connectivity things, but also make standards so that manufacturers can build their own solutions for remote pilotage, and it will be not independent about what manufacturers devices or software you have. You can do remote pilotage even if you have different manufacturers in installed. Of course, regulation is one big part, how we handle regulation of remote pilotage. But in the future, I think looking at artificial intelligence will make remote pilotage more safer than it is in the first when we start the service. Cybersecurity has been mentioned already several times, and it is important thing in remote pilotage when we are dealing with IT and all the kind of things. Remote pilotage architecture, as I told, it should be vendor independent, so that we can rely that manufacturers, for example, manufacturers will build us such devices or software where we can use in remote pilotage. Cloud service we went through already. Interfaces and data transfer should be standardized, but also the data what we collect, we need to have standardized interfaces to collect the data for it. We have been dealing with C4 value future payway navigation project past couple of years, and that there was remote pilotage was one of the use case in this project. And end of this project, we did remote pilotage demo. It was last May when we did this with ESL ship in the Kokkola Fairway. This wasn't, Sanna mentioned Regulation Pilotage Act. This wasn't such remote pilotage. We had a traditional pilot on ship, but also there was one of our remote pilots. Actually, a remote pilot was sitting in Turku, and there was also third remote pilot observing and analyzing how the process will go. Technology looked like this. We transferred we tested in the demo data transfer. We used 4G mobile network to collect the ship data and present it in remote pilot station. Bright House Intelligence has built this actually the whole system. And there was a little bit with delays because there was one misconfiguration in the system. But still, it proved us that technology there and it is working and it's usable for remote pilotage. A little bit better picture about what the remote pilot station looks like. Let's not go further there. This was the ship ends. There was a smart box which collects ship data and sends it through 4G network to shore. We had actually this demo was meant to be in Helsinki Fairway, and there was several sensors in this Lauttasaari, but we couldn't use it because we had to transfer demo to Kokkola Fairway. We identified few tasks we need to do. First, of course, cybersecurity. We have to have those risks managed. Data connections. We feel that in Kokkola it works quite well, but we need to develop more redundant and safe connections to remote pilotage. Radar data. Radar was transferred as an image, and we will need as a data because remote pilot couldn't adjust the radar picture at all, and it was quite big issue. We identified that we will need more sensors for vessel or for the ship to detect the movement of the ship. That is highly important. But also communication, verbal standard communication, what kind of devices and connections we will use to transfer that communication and verbal things. Situational awareness user interface should be standardized, and it should be similar in both ends, in remote pilot and also in ship. We had connect display, and it showed us almost everything, but there was a lot of things what we need to add more there. But also once more, the situational awareness is highly important, and it should be still developed further. Okay, then I give this.
A few words about the, that we will also talk about situational awareness. Of course, is the matter of trust between the captain and the remote pilot. So we need to create. We are taking the pilot away from the bridge team to somewhere outside, and of course we understand that the same kind of trust is very difficult to build remotely as it is when you are on the same room, so to speak, on the bridge area. But then a few words about the future. Last year we started developing a project that we called Nelson. The funding will be applied from the EU CEF instrument this year, late this year, and we have been collecting participants to this project because part of this project will be the remote pilotage work package. The planning organization for this project has been Finnish, mainly. Our authorities and also Meteorological Institute will be involved more heavily. Fintraffic responsible for VTS operations, us, and then universities and training institutes, Novia and Aalto University, having their responsibilities as slightly shown in the previous study. We also have an associate partner, Traficom, which is the authority making the legislation with the ministry and also the regulations, so a very important influencer. The VP3, I'll show the picture on the VPs later on. The VP3 will be the participants that we have invited so far are the European pilotage organizations. We actually had it here in Turku, remote pilotage days in December, and we started this work. And next month, 6th of February, we will have the first meeting with the partners. And then we will have associate partners and also an advisory steering group, probably with Australia, Canada, Singapore, and others, so we can involve them also in the work that we'll be doing this project. We have a lot of manufacturers that we have been talking with and promised them more or less that the pilotage organizations will provide them a common understanding about the standards, industry standards that the manufacturers can then use in order to define what the data, how the data and what data will be needed from the ship's equipment through interfaces. This is a very draft, and I'm just showing you this to highlight the fact that the project itself will be managed by Fintraffic. I hope that there is also Fintraffic people online in this session. The VP2 will be led by the Finnish Transport Infrastructure Agency. It's about the future fairway. VP3 will be led by us with the remote pilotage. VP4 will be about VTMIS services, bus operators, and different reporting harmonization, and that is led by Fintraffic. And then VP5 is on communication services and cybersecurity. We have not decided who or asked who will be that leader. And then the VP6 will be the ship systems, and we have some industry partners who are hoping to be the leader of that, but still discussing that. And then the VP7 is testing, validation, and deployment. This is a very brief, just to highlight a few ideas what the VP3 will look or what the tasks will be. We have done some work on this, but we will not go further on defining this project until we have our project consortium done so that we can do this together with them. Sorry, we went a little over time, but we started late, but that was our presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I did put in chat box that I will let this session go about 10 minutes overtime. So I do apologize if people need to leave. I fully understand, but I would like to have an opportunity to open the floor for some questions. It was very interesting, and I do see a big, heavy link into technology there. I do want to say one thing before we get into the questions, and that is, I have spent so long in my maritime career thinking about this concept of the shared mental model and how do we get that shared mental model. The approach that you're taking is actually providing that technical link. So you're actually going to have a shared model of information, that shared cooperative model. We don't need to have someone think what's in my mind and what's in your mind. We'll have that information available to us through the sensors and through the decision support tools. So I find that I just made a little link on that. And now we have a more visible shared model. I would like to open the floor to some questions, please. Yes, please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. My laptop is dead. Well, yeah, that was a very, very interesting presentation. Yeah, I totally agree that you were pointing out about the future of edge navigation there. So I think in the future we will have a very different requirements for marine edge navigation, and such as the level of service, availability, reliability, and in terms of the accuracy, I think your project will require very high accuracy information as well. So how do you see about the future requirements for marine edge navigation? So from your project, do you require any new type of edge navigation, or does it need to be enhanced?
The project itself is about innovation, and one of the things that I'm so happy that we are here is that the project that Tero mentioned, where we did the demo and the risk assessments, everything, the C4 value, was actually the Future Fairway. The name of the project was Future Fairway, and it highlighted the fact that we would like to involve to this development. As I said, pilotage is just one of the services, fairway services. So the fairway itself will be one of the main contributors and the future aids to navigation to these services, whether it's pilotage or VTS, icebreaking, etc., etc. So we would like to invite those stakeholders and developers related to aids to navigation to join us to think about the future fairway. We also, as you noticed, the work package 2 was actually about the fairway, and that's where Finnish fairway and infrastructure agency is involved. And we believe that the aids to navigation will also, it will involve the present, but also I think that we need to totally look outside what is the aids to navigation in future. So I don't have an answer, in fact, that question. That is my biggest vision. I don't think that it will be just greens and reds. That's for sure.
Well, but the reason why I ask this is, from mass discussions, I haven't really heard about new requirements for marine navigation. They say, it is a fine, they are, they have reliable position information. So maybe in the future, marine navigation is not required. But I believe this is not really the case. So, so from the road industry, I heard about, there are cases that, the future, what is a street lights, they are equipped with the cameras, and then they get all the information from by the infrastructure. So the role of infrastructure is very important. But that's not really what I heard from the Mars discussion. So I wanted to know about if you saw any of these cases, and so that was why I was asking, what will be the new requirements from?
I hope that we could do the new requirements together, but I have to say that I fully agree with you on the mass issue, because I'm involved with the discussion, but not heavily. But I have been involved since 2010 when Rolls-Royce started doing the first tests, and I know the idea. They are often focusing on the open sea navigation, and they are focusing on independent navigation. So the mass ship is not, it doesn't need the aids to navigation, at least the way we understand aids to navigation today. And so this is a long discussion. When it comes to pilotage, aids to navigations are crucial. We are talking about the challenging part of fairway. We're talking about the last mile concepts, accuracy, totally different than open sea navigation. Challenges, totally different. So I fully agree that we need to look at what is the future.
Thank you. And that safe tube concept, so the three-dimensional, the air draft, the underkeel clearance, the interaction between that dynamic approach that we have. And there was one technology we looked at our last meeting, which is a remote assessment of air draft clearance as well. So the technologies that are starting to be identified by these use cases. Just before I go to the next question, because Martin, you are in the room, are you not, Martin? About the mass discussion aspect. So I'm just wondering from your point of view, so Martin, just for information, Martin's leading the IALA Mass Task Force. So I'm just wondering from your perspective, are there any key things that I really should be making note of that we need to bring into our mass discussions?
And I don't think so, because most of the things we've heard now are already on the agenda for the Mass Task Force. The only thing I think I'm a bit curious about the remarks from the presenters, the relationship between mass and pilotage. As far as I know, there isn't pilotage will be needed. But how does a pilot work with a remote or an or fully autonomous ship? That's something I didn't hear about anything about it.
You can take that one offline if you like. So you can take that one offline.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering, did you understand that question is really about the concept of a pilot with a mass vessel? So we have a remote. The issue that we have with mass, of course, is autonomous does not necessarily mean uncrewed. But if we have a remote pilot with a vessel that's coming in remotely or controlled remotely, has that been part of your discussion as well that you're looking at with this pilotage Sanna
Yes,
or
we have.
Tero?
So as I said, we've been part of the 1C autonomous maritime ecosystem for many years already, and having a background on the authority side. So most of the studies earlier done were focusing on that we're talking about the open sea navigation on mass, and then many of the partners involved think that the fairway part, the pilot will board the ship. Of course, that is one option, but we have been looking also that because it doesn't mean, as Gillian said, that it is unmanned. So we are involved. We've been working with Wärtsilä with several projects, and we're also working with ABB, who is doing the electronic line of sight, or even talking even about unmanned bridge on open sea areas. So we are involved with this project related to mass, so that what will be the different roles of pilotage? There will not be just one role, but there will be a different role when we do it remotely. And of course, here we come to the difficult question of how many remote centers will we have, and what is the information exchange between the remote pilot and the remote control station, etc. So this is what, again, why we are part of the ecosystem, because the pilotage cannot define that alone. It has to be part of this ecosystem. We also talk about situations where maybe the challenges are so great that one pilot will board the ship, but another pilot will be assisting remotely. But all of these variances of pilotage, I think this is exciting, because the pilots need to evolve with the concept of mass in order to serve the needs of the mass. And this is what we agreed with the 1C ecosystem.
It's very exciting and very interesting as well. You mentioned about the pilot interacting with the mouse. We've also been in IALA thinking about from a VTS perspective. We've been doing a lot of discussion on, what is the role with VTS. We have gone over time. I will allow one more question before I close this out. If there is one last question anybody would like to ask.
Please.
Yes, I see a hand up.
Thank you. Neil Salter from UK Hydrographic Office. I picked up on an important word that was used in your presentation, which was an excellent presentation, thank you. And that was standardization. Now, following the IMO directive on the reduction of greenhouse gases, the Port Call Optimization Task Force was stood up, as chaired by Ben van Scherpenzeel of the Port of Rotterdam. Have you been working with Ben? If not, would you like to do so? Because he's already encountered a lot of the problems you are now facing.
We haven't and would like yet, because remote pilot is one of the, I think, also part of that way the ecosystem that it will ease up the processes in future. Related to, yeah, thank you very much.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much for that presentation. You certainly have given us food for thought. And then from an IALA perspective, I hope that this actually has also opened up some perhaps future discussions, because I see a link in here to the ARM committee, to the VTS committee, not only just to the technology to support this. So we've been looking at a lot of different types of technologies, and the future vision for the evolution of aids to navigation. Very, very interesting. So thank you very much for the presentation.
Thank you for taking us. Okay.
And thank you everyone for your patience and letting us go over time. Now, Ernie, you're on site there. I will be available. I can leave a note in the room. We're always in the same room, so it doesn't really matter too much. Is everyone happy if we still take the full half hour for the break, or do you want a slightly shorter break? Ernie, I'll leave it up to you. You're physically there.
I would be unhappy if it was less than half an hour.
You would be unhappy if it's less than half an hour. Well, so would I, actually, because I've been saving this half hour for me to have my dinner time, because it's now 20:44. So I'm going to go have my dinner. You go have your coffee break. Everyone online, we will take the full 30 minutes. I will leave my channel open. I'll just mute and take off on camera, and I'll leave a message there as well in case anyone comes. Now, the next session that we have is actually, I was hoping, Ernie, you might sort of drive it from your side on the screen. I can do it from my side either way, but it is to review that guideline 1153 on the digital VHF voice that we had started. So I'd like to close that one out, specifically focused on DPMR. So I am hoping that Derek and Jeffrey, you'll be able to stick around for that. Okay, break time. We'll see you back here in 30 minutes, which for me is 21:15. For you will be what time? 30 minutes. We'll see you back.
11:15.
Sorry? Yarra Birkeland.
Yeah,
It's do you know? Are you familiar with it?
yeah.
That's been run as a maths degree 3 remote pilotage operation. Eventually, it's going to be totally unmanned for the first year. But but that will be controlled and piloted from a remote.
Yeah.
So it's there, it's happening.
It's happening now. There's a lot of pilots are all over the world. I know in the Netherlands we do have some in Belgium we do it together with the Netherlands on the British Health. There are some projects.
Christopher, if you have time to look at the document. I sent it.
Just only. Nothing that.
And understand it's own
No, but it looked fine.
It needs to be everyone.
Actually, I can't remember what I wrote and what you wrote, so it's completely.
Yeah, because we were two people editing the document and then we first keep the track changes, but then it was so, full of edition that we decided just to kind of clean it up.
Yeah.
But it was about maybe the general idea.
Yeah, but the structure, I like the structure looks fine.
Okay.
It's.
Yes, that was the point.
Oh.